Good evening, folks. Good afternoon, good morning, good night. I don't know whenever you guys listen to this podcast, but hope you guys are doing well. And today we're going to be talking about why you should not start a coffee roasting company. Do you regret starting a coffee roasting company?
Of course not.
Oh, I thought you were going to leave us out of course.
Of course not.
Oh, God. No. Yeah.
Yeah. No, of course not. But it's insane to think of all the things that we've learned in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Like, and
100%.
Looking back, it's almost like, would you have wanted to know all of these difficulties and technicalities, or would you just want to walk in just ignorance is bliss method?
Yeah.
I don't know which one's better.
Yeah. There's a tension somewhere in there, but we can jump into that just shortly. Once again, always tasting some batchy, doing a little taste test.
Such a bad idea. I should have just went with a good coffee.
God, I told him, like, are you sure you want to brew a drip batch brew of a coffee that's roasted literally less than 24 hours ago?
Well, can't really say much about this sip. I just don't like it.
The smells are not bad, but...
it's not tasty. It's pretty metallic. It's a nasty mouthfeel. Just so unpleasant.
Yeah.
Just not tasty. It's a bummer.
Folks, rest your coffee before you brew it.
Yeah.
Let it degas. Let it...
at the end of the day, this is also not a dialed-in roast. This was like an experimental cupping.
But it should not be tasting like this. Like, I don't care what dial-in batch you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Am I going to continue sipping on this? Probably, because I just like sipping on coffee. Do I always enjoy my sips?
That's devastating.
No.
That's
I need to make some
God.
data, and I need to create a graph of a visual aspect of all the information of how many cups of coffee I actually enjoy.
That's true, yeah. You won't need a big data book. I'll tell you that. The back end is so outrageous. It's just like cringy. Oh, God.
This isn't the coffee. No, it's not the coffee that I always think tastes like chicken bouillon or bone broth.
Oh, God. We need like a mirror taster like program where you sign up for like an exclusive group that's like we just send you like just random roasts that we ask for your opinion on, like don't they have that? Like I guess it'd be like a beta testers.
Yeah,
like people who are like, hey, sign up for iOS like 17 3 months in advance, and it's like always crashing and
gets leaked to the jailbreakers.
Guys, who used to jailbreak their iPhones? I did. Jailbreaking back in the day was a hot commodity.
Dude,
I made a whole business about it. It was me in high school.
That's right. I remember.
Like, people would give me their iPod touches, and I would go jailbreak them for a small little fee and just like little hustling within high school. But it was scary because you could really mess it up. You can break your phone or your iPod, and it just doesn't turn on anymore.
Yeah.
That was scary.
Yeah, that was a bad time.
The stakes are high.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, someone can like grab that sample and like of coffee and do whatever they want, repackage it, maybe send it over to someone else. Be like a jailbroken
Season
coffee,
your birds.
season your bird. There you go. It would be interesting to have. That's not a bad idea. On a serious note, to have a I think you and I talked about it. To have as owners of a roasting company, to have a network of folks that cup and taste coffee. And the reason it would be exclusive is not because we don't want to include everybody, but so that we can get some data and some information from someone and be like, yeah, we're all tasting. Like if 5 people say the coffee tastes roasty, then it probably tastes roasty.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that helps.
Yeah.
That's much different than if like one of us says it's roasty and the other one says it's not. Like, you know what I mean? That's
difficult.
That's difficult because you're like, well, who's right kind of thing. But if you have a network of people that are like that, so it's one neat idea about owning a roasting company for you.
Yeah. And calibration, palate calibration with a specific group of people matters a lot.
Yeah, totally.
And knowing what other people are tasting because you've cupped with them or you guys are tasting the same coffees and that's important. I think that becomes really, really important when you're roasting coffee when and how do I say this without saying something not what I mean? Like when you're really trying to aim for specialty craft, not to say like dark roast is not, but when you're really trying to like play within the tiny margins of what majority of us refer to as specialty coffee, where we're trying to hold on to a lot of the volatile flavor compounds, aromas, when we're trying to bring out as much perceived sweetness and acidity out of the coffee. That's what I'm talking about, where it's it's important to have other people share their opinion, because I mean, like, even the cupping that we literally just cupped on this table like 30 minutes ago, and when we were talking about like a 1 degree difference,
that's insane. And
blindly, you and I both blindly agreed that these 2 bowls of the same coffee taste different. We had, for the most part, not for everything, we agreed on most of the things.
Yeah.
And it was a 1 degree difference.
Right.
It's wild.
Yeah. And you're not talking about like 1 degree difference in comparison to like a shot of espresso pulling 1 second too long, too short. It's not even comparable. It's like 1 second over the course of 30 seconds. Cool. 1 degree over the course of 400 degrees.
Wait, 1 degree over the course of 400 degrees?
Yeah. Like, because we're roasting, dropping coffees at like 400 degrees.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like 1 degree out of that big number is a tiny sliver of a margin.
Yeah, and like
you know what I mean?
said
over the course of our roasts are like 9-ish minutes.
9, 10, 11.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a lot of time to manage small, like 1 degree, 5-10 seconds. Like, that's insane.
Yeah. And 100%. It just gets real wild real fast. And sometimes that 1 degree, depending on what your ROR is when you're dropping coffee, could be 10 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's insane.
Insane. Yeah.
And if you were to ask me once again, like 3-4 years ago, if I could taste that, I'd be like, no, come on, there's no way. Whatever, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Sure, I can taste the difference between a 400 and a 410 roast.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, oh no, you could taste like a degree difference.
Yeah.
And 20-second difference. Like,
not
to say
wild.
one is worse than the other, but it's tasteable.
Yeah.
Which it just, it just gets really extremely difficult. And that's why I think this conversation is so important, is like why you shouldn't start a roasting company, because it just might save you. Like, there might be easier ways to get what you want out of owning a roasting company through a different avenue.
100%.
That could save you time, energy, stress, all the things that come with running a full operation.
Yeah.
Apart from just roasting. And just like what we said, like the difference, those margins are so small. But if we really want to be honest, number one, we'd say is there's actually a lack of a roadmap in the world. There's literally a lack of a roadmap of roasting techniques, like roasting definitives, facts, because you can listen to two very experienced people in the roasting industry that are trying to go for the same flavor profile to share completely different theories about roasting approaches.
Yeah, you can find someone who, and they would both equally roast tasty coffee. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's insane.
That's the other part is, again, never forgetting that aspect that tasty means it means different to anyone or whoever, you know what I mean? It's pretty subjective. So within that, it's like, man, you can follow one roaster. I'm thinking of some names, not going to say it, and you'll get a flavor profile that's probably nice. You'll probably enjoy. You've probably bought their coffee before, and the classic, like, oh man, I like how these folks roast. I'm gonna ask them to give me not counsel. What's the word? Consulting. Yeah, consultation, and that's great. And then after your consultation, maybe a year after, you meet another roaster, and you talk to that roaster, and they roast this way, and you're like, oh, their coffee also tastes good. And it's a whole different perspective on how they approach a roast.
100%.
Like, I think for both you and I, I know I've sat under some other roasters that had more of the SCA kind of method of roasting. Then we've learned a lot from Scott, predominantly for Mirror. And then we've also, I went through the webinar with Ann Cooper.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of them are very experienced folks in the industry who know how to taste coffee.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? There's that experience, but the approach is so different. So I think the difficulty and kind of the reminder is you may want to reconsider making those decisions. And there's a different way for you to actually be able to roast coffee rather than making that final call on what style.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it just gets really complicated because when it feels like it would be nice to have somebody say, this is just wrong universally, and there's none of that, you're like, well, then where do we start? Where do we go? Even when do I put the beans inside of the roaster?
Yeah, totally.
Do I start it at 300? 400?
Yeah.
Do I start it at 500?
Yeah.
And there's a couple pillars that I think a lot of people would just agree on.
To put it. Yeah.
Like a couple pillars where I think universally most people would agree on. Like, you don't charge your coffee at 500 degrees. Yeah. Literally, it might disintegrate by the time your roast gets done. Yeah. But that being said, those pillars, there's very few of them. And there's way more mysteries and unknowns to achieving a beautiful flavor profile than most people would like to admit.
Yeah.
And even the people who say, oh no, it's black and white. I to know this for sure.
Yeah.
Well, when you have 20 different people saying that about 20 different approaches
with equal experience
and equally decent coffee that you enjoy, things get really confusing, and that's hard as a roaster. And we've learned that a lot from our roasting background and experience, whether from when you had your roasting job to now us running Mirror. It's complicated.
Yeah.
So why you shouldn't start? Well, because it's just freaking, it's a tornado.
Yeah.
You're
totally.
It's rough.
It's totally rough. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I was going to repeat what you said, but for the most part, it's I wish there was more of a, you go to school, get a degree, and now you have everything you need to start a roasting company.
Yeah. 100%.
That kind of pat down information. Yeah. But there's a lot of adventure, and who knows? You should reconsider, but maybe you want to adventure. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I would love someone to walk into starting a roasting company with the knowledge of it might not go the way it should.
Yes.
Or the way you imagine.
The way you imagine, yeah. And that's, we just can't stress that enough because it's just so important. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not easy, and to know that, I wish somebody even told me that before.
Yeah.
Just so I can even be mentally prepared for what was to come. So, number 2, we would say, don't start a roastery if you just want to roast tasty coffee.
Classic. I mean, it's a similar concept as, man, like I want this barista job because I want to own a cafe. Like that concept. It's like, man, maybe you should just be an excellent barista. Like you don't have to own a cafe. Like, you know what I mean? And same thing with that. Like maybe you should just be an excellent roaster.
Yeah.
Like, and get paid salary. I actually have a friend who owned a roasting company who just sold it, moved on, and got a job for a big roasting company and became their lead roaster.
Yeah.
And he enjoys it. Like he's having a blast. He's still doing what he loves. Just realize that the other parts of the business, the other moving like wheels and all of the elements that you have to actually control and be able to do really, really well in order to roast coffee. Now you don't have to do. You can focus on that craft.
100%. And the fact that, like, to be honest, roasting takes up maybe 10 to 15% of the time as business owners. Maybe not as a production roaster or a head roaster. As business owners, to us, 15% of the time goes to actually roasting. The rest of the time, it's like running all the tedious and annoying stuff that you have to do to run a business, to keep things running, functioning smoothly.
Yeah.
And especially when you're starting out, especially when you're small, before you can, hire an accountant, hire a social media manager, hire a marketing team, hire all this, until you can start delegating all those things, somebody has to do it. And chances are it's you until you can get there. And, at that point, you're roasting for a small period of time, which is fun. It's exciting. It's great. But then you're leaving that, and then you're doing paperwork, answering emails, we'll talk about logistics soon, but figuring out logistics, sales, and kind of all the stuff. And I think people just overlook that, and roasting coffee is romanticized as like, nice. All I'm going to do is taste coffee, brew lots of coffee, and I'm going to roast. And that's what running a roasting company is. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
Please.
And I think also within that, it's like if you've never actually like roasted coffee, and I know we've said this probably a million times on the podcast, but the fact is, like, how do you even know that you just want to roast coffee? Yeah. Like, how do you know that? Like, the other side of the story could be like you actually do want to own a roasting company, but you don't want to roast coffee. Like, you won't figure that out. You won't know that. And if the way you discover that is by starting a company, I don't think that's necessary. Like, you don't have to discover what you actually want to do within like coffee by starting a company. And there's a lot easier ways. Go ahead.
You can. It's just you're just playing with much higher stakes. You're paying. You're playing with the time and energy that you're putting in. You're playing with the finances that you dumped into buying. Your IR 2.5 kilo machine or your IR 12. You're paying with a lot of the headache of health department and inspections and logistics and bags and everything. Like you're paying with a lot, and so it's way easier. You're gonna save yourself a lot of time. We say this all the time. Go work for a roasting company that aligns with your core values, with what you want to do, and and then you'll really find out that do you want to start one or not. And a lot of people go roast for other companies, leave and start their own and become successful. Great. And our job, like this podcast, isn't about talking you out of it. It's just to give you some awareness that, hey, you don't have to own it to enjoy the roasting process. Actually, you might actually enjoy it more when that's all you're doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Letting somebody else take care of the stress and just doing the fun parts, that actually might be more beneficial for you.
100%. Dude, 100%. That's very well said.
Yeah. And we touched upon like logistics, And logistics play such a big role in roasting coffee. One thing that I maybe like I underestimated was how complex the roasting business is when it's international, when you're dealing with countries overseas, when you're dealing with countries that are going through different political times, weather, climate, like the logistics of just working with, depending on a supply chain that goes beyond your borders, can get really complicated really quickly.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to stick to your like values, like as a company. Like if you say you want to source like ethical and sustainable, coffee, and in order to do that, you have to like directly buy from a farmer. Mm-hmm. This is just a very broad example. Yeah. But if you want to do those things, like without considering the actual like climate, and I'm not talking about weather, but the general like what's going on in that country.
Yeah.
Like if you want to do that, but you don't understand that side of it, like how are you going to do that? How are you going to live up to your values? Like we had a situation when there was like a political unrest in one of the African countries that we were getting coffee from. And it just, we couldn't do what we wanted to do. We couldn't stick to that commitment. We couldn't stick to that agreement. And it's not necessarily like that we had to back out. It just, we had to wait. We had to process that. You know what I mean? Sometimes I think the logistics, it almost feels too easy. Like, oh, you go online, you find someone you want to source coffee from, you send them an email, and it's done. But that's only the beginning. Yeah. You know what I mean? How do you sustain that relationship when you literally have to have a business commitment with a partner who is not of the same culture as you, is not of like the same just understanding of economics as your country? Like you have to consider that. And you also have to consider that just because you live in the United States doesn't exclusively give you the right to call all the shots and to be able to be exclusively right.
100%.
You know what I mean? So there's so much at play because you are like once you start buying green coffee, you're literally involved in international trade.
Yeah. And to many people, that's just not what you think going into this. Yeah. And you're right. Like, I think most people just imagine themselves, which you can do this. Go on Google, type in green beans and hit buy now and have a pallet arrive at your house. You can do that. But probably for most folks, maybe even listening to this podcast, they kind of want to go beyond a little bit of that.
Right. 100%.
And I hope we do, because I hope we care about the supply chain more than just doing that.
Yeah.
And for Mir, a lot of what we're trying to do is really build meaningful long-term relationships with producers in a way that's beneficial for us and for them.
Yeah.
And it's a partnership, it's a relationship. And that takes a lot of trust. That takes some failures, some mistakes, some wins, some losses. And a lot of problem solving, like what happens when you, even us forward booking a coffee from Jorge Mendez in Guatemala, and then realizing like it's not coming 3-4 months later than expected because of just international supply chains and logistics. How do we solve that problem?
Yeah.
Like just to know that the problem solving just doesn't end.
Yeah.
What happens when you forward book and it's not up to quality? How do you solve that problem? It just adds another layer of complexity that you need to be aware of.
Even like our printed bags, like you have to understand something about the culture of the country we're getting the bags from in order to put in an order to get them on time. Like our bags are coming from China. Like we have to understand the Chinese New Year. We have to understand their holidays. We have to understand like what they value. Because I mean, no matter what, we are basically the ball is in their court. Like they're gonna make our bags, they're gonna print them, they're gonna ship them to us. We can't change any of that, and we are actually happy about joining. We're happy about this, the logistics of this progress system. It's great. Like it's not a bad thing, but it's a matter of like, man, if you don't know and you approach that as like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna find this company, send them a design, and I'll have my bags in a month. Well, that's not how it works. Like, you know, I mean, the logistics of doing that and getting that finalized, getting the actual product you want. I mean, it's much more than that.
Yeah. So long story short, you shouldn't start a roasting company if you don't want to deal with that. It just, that's the reality of it. And that's roasting 101 for you before we even get to roasting.
Totally. Yeah.
So, any final thoughts?
Yeah. I think it's actually like part of it is it's great. It's like there's a low barrier to entry. I get that. It's like almost anyone, like we said in one of our episodes, that anybody can go get a business license, start a roasting company. That's great. But that's also, I think, like a major, major issue, that the barrier to entry is so low.
For sure.
That the idea, this like romantic idea of like owning a coffee company is so easy to jump in without actually like processing the amount of damage you can do to yourself, to other people. And you can actually not like live out your dream. Like, and I think for us, like when we know how like passionate we are, you and I, about coffee, we know there's folks that are also super passionate about coffee. Yeah. We want you to live out your passions. Like we want you to live out your goal, because we're living it. So therefore, it's not almost like, hey, just forget about, this isn't a podcast about forgetting about your dreams. Yeah. This is a podcast of being like, consider to make your dreams like a reality. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And a lot of what I want to say also is that it's not about, we're not trying to talk anybody out of it, but giving you some padding of like, this is what you should be ready for, so you don't overestimate and romanticize it way more, so that you're more well prepared. Or the flip side, you realize like, this isn't for me. Well, I rather realize it's not for me before starting a roasting company than realizing that right now, when we're 2 years in, 3 years in, that's even more difficult. So for real, super good.
Yeah, hopefully that was helpful, and I'm sure that was helpful. Like I in my opinion, I wish I heard this
totally
2-3 years ago. Yeah. So. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a review if you like this podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you watch. And send us a DM. Once again, drop something in the comments. Share with us your thoughts and ideas. We always love to hear from you. But that being said, thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.